My name is Christina Crook, and I am the author of The Joy of Missing Out. I want to welcome you to the JOMOcast, a podcast for individuals who want to learn how to thrive in a digital age. JOMO is the joy of missing out on the right things. Things like toxic hustle, comparison, and digital drain to make space for life-giving commitments to people and work that bring us peace, meaning, and joy. I want to say a big welcome to new patrons Claire Kilmer, Rob Schellenberg, Jumana Abu Ghazela, the founder and CEO of Pivot for Humanity, and Michelle Stern-Bucknia. Thank you so much for your support of the podcast. The JOMOcast is 100% listener supported. Each episode takes about 40 hours to create and involves the work of our composer and producer, Tom.
Hello.
Social media lead, Rebecca.
Hello.
And me. We believe there are new and even more urgent questions to be asked now about digital well-being, given that most of us will need to depend almost exclusively on digital channels for social support for the foreseeable future. On the podcast, we answer questions like, how can I stop comparing online and trust that I am enough? How do I shift my attention from passively consuming online to creatively connecting with neighbors and loved ones? How do I build the self-discipline to see things through? How do I stay on track, doing the things I say I want to do without getting hijacked online? How do I make space for rest and play? How do I succeed in life without burning out? This podcast is made possible by you, our listeners all over the world, from Brazil to Australia, the USA to Singapore. Please support the JOMOcast for just $3 a month. Visit patreon.com/JOMOcast and sign up today. You will get JOMO swag and a handwritten note of thanks from me in the mail, a shout out on the podcast, and a place on the JOMO wall of thanks for all of time. You'll also have the opportunity to ask future guests your questions. And thank you for supporting the content that supports you. Welcome back to the JOMOcast. I'm super excited about the episode I'm sharing today with Damian Bradfield, the CCO, the Chief Creative Officer at WeTransfer, and author of a new book called the Trust Manifesto. We're at a very unusual moment in modern history where a roughly equal number of generations alive today have either a lived experience of near total personal privacy, and with it, great consumer power over the way they were marketed to, or a lived experience of nearly every experience, action, and statement being collected, analyzed, and sold as commodities by the companies selling us their goods, ideas, and policies online, to the point that we can be offered something before we consciously know we want it. Have you ever had that experience where you see an ad on one of your social media platforms about something that you've never verbally said out loud that you want? This is the new world we're living in. How did that happen? Damian Bradfield is the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of WeTransfer and WePresent, the author of the Trust Manifesto, host of the Influence podcast, and the creator of Empty Day, which is sort of like a UK version of the National Day of Unplugging. Damian's file-sharing company, WeTransfer, sends over 1.5 million files a day. It's a much-beloved company. In 2016, he moved from Amsterdam to California to set up WeTransfer's U.S. headquarters, where he's been instrumental in shaping the company's policy in support of the creative community. Damian is proud that companies like his recognize and value our rights to personal privacy and their responsibilities to their community, but he's painfully aware as a creator, consumer, and also a parent that the landscape is anything but benevolent. Damian is a powerful amplifier of the responsibility of tech companies in their roles as creators of some of the most powerful and influential presences in our lives, to not hurt us, to not trick us, not manipulate us, and to own the staggering impact their products have on the very fabric of our lives. In his new book, The Trust Manifesto, What We Need to Do to Create a Better Internet, which I devoured, He describes the web as our new collective city and asks the question, are these the conditions we want to be living in? I hope you enjoy my conversation with Damian Bradfield. I wanted to start out our conversation today with asking you, what does the joy of missing out mean to you?
It's a really good question. And I'm not sure if you'd have asked me perhaps even 5 years ago, I would have known at all what it meant. And definitely having been, and I obviously still am in the world of technology, I think it wasn't until I actively decided that I was going to leave Instagram and Facebook and everything other than Twitter. For some reason, I can't give up Twitter. But it wasn't until then that I actually really understood how relaxing it was to not feel that sort of pressure or anxiety about constantly being scared that you are missing out on something. And that was definitely my feeling with Instagram, was that I was just addicted to the idea that, you had to see and comment and post something to make sure that people were up to speed. And it's absolute nonsense, of course. And now when, if you haven't used social media for a long time, then you realize that it's absolute nonsense and your friends remain your friends and you don't miss out really on anything. Actually, you gain so much by not being addicted to your phone and not having to desperately grab for it every 5 minutes just to check that something else happened. That's a revelation that I only experienced in the last 5 years for sure. And something I desperately try and teach my kids. I had a very bad moment where I threw my son's phone out of the car window on PCH near Malibu as we were trying to show them the devastation of the forest fires in Malibu. And I got a little bit upset because my son was just looking at Instagram and not focusing on the sort of devastation that was around him. No matter how many times I'd ask him to put his phone down and just focus and have a look around and experience how bad it must be for these people living here, he kept getting sucked back into Instagram. And I just lost it and wound down the window and threw his phone out the window. And I've never seen my son so upset. Honestly, you'd think that I'd shot the dog. It was devastating. But that evening, he was skateboarding again, and he hadn't done it in months. So I have no regrets that it was a bit extreme and not my proudest parenting moment, but definitely one that I think was necessary and helped both of us. I don't know if that answers your question, but
it absolutely answered that question. And we're doing this interview in late March. We're in extraordinary, unprecedented times right now. And today there's even, newer and even more urgent questions to be asked about digital well-being, given the fact that most of us are going to be more reliant on digital channels than we ever have needed to before because of social distancing. Why does digital well-being, as I hear you share your story about your son, obviously there was a lack of well-being in that relationship online. Why does it concern you?
It concerns me because no matter what you can do with technology, no matter how much fun you can have with it, no matter how much you can, consume or learn or discover or, be entertained by, whatever it is, none of it is a replacement for physical connection. As you said, right, we're living through a very strange time at the moment with COVID-19 shutting everything down. And what I think is really interesting at this very moment is that I really believe that so many people are going to have a very cold bath in the reality of what it is to be isolated to such an extreme that I'm really quite optimistic that once we come out of it, people will be less on their phones and less behind a screen than ever before and longing for physical connection because they would have had this quite horrendous experiment in what, potentially the future could have looked like had we just continued to progress spending and being more and more absorbed by technology or, screens literally every day. And the thing that was concerning me, and I'm actually less concerned today because I think the situation might actually be a wake-up call to a lot of people. But what was concerning me was just, and particularly if I looked at my kids, the technology is built to be addictive. The phones are made to look super sexy, so you want to have them on you all the time. They're an accessory. They are, a status symbol. They fit perfectly in your pocket. They do everything for you. You no longer need to have a watch. You don't need to have an address book. You don't need to have anything on you other than that phone. And for a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old, it's life or death. And when I threw my son's phone out the window, I could see, how critical it had become to him. And that's worrying, right? I mean, honestly, if you'd have seen his face, it was like I had murdered the dog. The expression was just horror that, I could have thrown this lifeline of his away and that he was going to have lost all of his connections and had lost his status and had lost his Snapchat streaks and, would have to create new identities and new logins for everything. And he didn't have passwords for this, that, and the other. And I just looked at him and went, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. It's not real. But it had become so real, and it is so real for so many of us that I think, it's an obsession, right? And that's what a lot of, tech companies were producing was, obsessive, compulsive, addictive pieces of software. Without really any concern or care for what it was going to do to people's minds or emotional well-being. Again, a slight beacon of hope was that even recently, Mark Zuckerberg, who I'm assuming is at home spending more time with his family than he's ever done in his life, probably thought to himself, "This is quite bad. I haven't got all these people around me, and I'm not traveling and flying everywhere. So I'm at home like regular, Joe Public." And everyone is in a similar situation to everybody else at the moment, which is probably the first time we'll ever experience this, or maybe the last time we'll ever experience this. And Mark Zuckerberg commented that he was very concerned for those people that were looking and vetting content on Facebook, and he was concerned for their mental well-being. And that was the first time he's ever mentioned or talked about mental well-being. And I believe that's come about only because of this situation. So, if someone like Mark Zuckerberg is beginning to show slightest bit of empathy, again, I'm optimistic that we might be turning a corner, and these tech, giants might be beginning to think about the tools that they've created and what impacts they have in the hands of those that are, less fortunate and less able to choose or to join a sports club or to join, go to a bar or to eat out or whatever else.
There's so much we could unpack there in terms of the hopes and desires we have of the habits, and practices we're been forced into during this unexpected season of time and how many we're going to carry out. I think I hear you. That seems like a longing and a desire for these, these habits of being, especially spending more time with family to continue afterwards. And I think that's something I'm hearing people like Bill Gates say and others. And it's definitely something that I hope to practice with my own family and encourage those around me to do. But it's going to be really interesting to watch people, choose what's really essential after all of the dust settles, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a time frame, right, where we really have to look after one another. It's so difficult, isn't it, in society when you have there's so much discrepancies between, wealth and income and education, everything is so big that it's always, I think it's difficult for a lot of people to reflect and look at others and empathize based on their situation versus your own or their own. But in this context, we are all challenged with pretty much the same environment and the same challenges as everybody else. So I think, if we're going to help each other, if we're going to help society, I think this is the moment to do it, because we've all basically been given this sort of reset moment that is forcing us to have to look around and go, okay, well, yeah, this is tough. I'm finding it really tough. How are you finding it? Wow, he's on his own. He must be in excruciating pain because he's got no one to talk to, and he's been divorced 3 times and he's sitting at home where his kids are on the other side of the world. God, that must be excruciating. How can we help them? Look at that small business. I used to go there all the time and I was totally reliant on, shopping there or eating out there 3 times a week. They're going to go bankrupt. What can I do for them? I think, this could be quite an interesting moment where we understand and begin to appreciate the importance of, connectivity and human connection more so than ever before. I really hope that we don't come out of this period thinking, shit, that was great. I want to spend the rest of my life on Zoom and Google Hangout because this is the future. That's going to be... We
love you, Zoom. Thank you.
Oh my God, it's going to be a tragedy if that is the outcome. No, I mean, it's great, right? Zoom serves a purpose, but, it can't be our lifeblood. Well, certainly I would not be able to hack it. Let's put it that way. Maybe everybody else can. I definitely don't think I could. 8 weeks of this, I'm going to go crazy.
Absolutely. No, you're 100% right. I was just joking about Zoom, although I can't imagine a time that I've ever felt more grateful for technology than I do in this very moment.
No, sure. But it's a bit like a lifeboat, right? It's fantastic to have it there, but you don't want to live in it. You don't want to use it every day. It's just a nice thing to have to help you manage to continue with your life or to get through it. Yeah, exactly.
Today is not a regular work day for you, Damian, but I am curious to understand, as someone who is a tech founder, a CCO, an author, what are 2 actionable things that you do to keep the on and offline balance right in your life? So I'm curious about a work practice that you use and a personal practice you use in terms of using technology well and not letting it sort of take over your life.
So within the family, we have sort of some rules. So no one checks their phone before breakfast, and no one checks their phone or has their phone anywhere near a table that we're eating at. So be that today it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But at any of those moments, there's not a phone in sight, and it's really just we're talking and communicating with one another. Phones never go into the bedroom, so they're always left downstairs. They all charge downstairs at night. And an hour before I go to bed, I don't want to be anywhere near a screen, just to make sure that my mind at least is unwinding, and try to make sure that I'm not being triggered anymore. But like an hour before I go to sleep, so that in that time we're either talking, having a cup of tea or something, or reading a book. And then work-wise, I would love to say that I have this incredibly strict regime, which I get through every day. I'm not a guy who goes to the gym at 5 a.m. I'm not, already doing calls from my car or on the train at 6:30 in the morning. I eat breakfast every morning with my kids. I try not to basically check email until after 11, and just to work on, what I want to work on. If I can, I try to keep my diary, my calendar full in the mornings, 3 days a week, so that no one else can plan anything. And that's my time to think about, to write, to work on a presentation, to work on feedback or reviews or whatever it is that I need to get done. And then only after that time get into getting back to what everybody else needs. The thing I really struggle with is messaging. So all of that is great. And then there's frigging Slack and WhatsApp. And those 2 things I haven't got to grips with, because they just seem to pop into my life, and I'm not disciplined enough to switch them off so that they distract me. Because with certain people, I have a relationship with them on Slack or on WhatsApp that I don't have on iMessage or email. So I always feel a bit guilty about switching them off, that I might snub somebody for a couple of days. So those 2 things keep, screw up my whole plan.
Do you give any attention to those before 11 a.m. or is that also after 11 a.m.?
No. So I don't. I really try not to touch anything until after 11. So the only thing I'll do is I'll get on the phone, or I'll message my family or something. But I really try. It's not always possible. I really try to keep off everything until 11.
That's a fantastic practice. I think a lot of people could put into practice themselves. And I love that you are completely honest that it isn't, a rigid thing. It's more of a regime, and you've got a lot of intentionality about how you're spending your time, because I think a lot of us are tired of hearing about the CEOs that are, like you kind of joked about, up at 5 a.m. or even earlier, and ramping right up and life hacking their way through to make every moment count. And I love that you start the day eating breakfast with your children. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, they're not always wonderful, but it is it is always nice to. Oh, you know how it goes, right? Some days you can have best intentions, and then it doesn't work out, and you get dragged into meetings that end up taking over. Especially when my kids were younger, there could be days where I literally didn't see them for days on end, and it wasn't because I was traveling. I just was up early and out the door, and then home late, and they were in bed. That's just a bit of a tragedy, right? You literally miss weeks on end of seeing your kids grow. And what for? For a meeting? For an OKR review or something or other? Yeah, I don't really think that's worth it. So again, it's really about best intentions. obviously every now and again it goes completely awry, and I'm quite erratic too. So it could be that I have weeks of being super disciplined and managing to keep it all on track, and then something will happen. It will generally actually be that I won't go to the gym or work out for a couple of weeks, and then I'm off the rails. And then I know, then it's like a complete reset, and everything can sort of fall down. And I have a month of that, and then I have to pull myself back together again, kick myself up the bum, and then get back on track.
Sounds like those structures do really support you.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Oh no, I'd be a nightmare if I didn't have that. I mean, I also have a wife who's very, very good at sort of keeping me in check too. So she knows well before I do when I'm sort of hitting that moment where I'm getting too stressed, or I'm taking on too much, or not focused properly. She's pretty good at flagging. She's probably my early warning system.
That's wonderful to have. My next question for you is, what's your favorite thing to do unplugged? And before you answer that, I should mention that you're one of the creators of Empty Day, which for those of us in North America might think of it as something like the National Day of Unplugging, a day to give up social media. So it sounds like unplugging is something that's important to you. So what's your favorite thing to do unplugged?
I know that we would probably all have a device, with us all the time. But if I'm, generally, if I'm doing something other than working, I'm pretty much unplugged anyway. So if it's eating with friends, I won't be there with my phone out, texting or doing something else while I'm at the table. The same with watching a movie, or the same with going for a run. I don't take my phone with me or anything else. Come the weekend, I'm barely on my phone, in the slightest, or connected to anything. We're in the process of doing up a new house. I don't want to have a connected house. I don't want to have my lights that, being controlled by, geolocation. As I rock up, the lights will come on and my Sonos automatically plays Darth Vader or something other. I don't need any of that stuff. I quite look forward to, putting a record on a record player and actually listening to the radio, and listen to the radio more so probably as everybody right at this moment in time. But I listen to the radio and audio more than I've ever done. And yeah, I don't want to be that connected at all, really. It doesn't help. And I mean, there's another underlying part to this too, which is, I have quite big concerns around, what data is being collected about us and what people are going to do with that data. I think a big part of my book was about investigating who was collecting what and what information browsers were collecting about us as we use them. And I understand how convenient it is. And in speaking to most people, convenience is the biggest killer of our time, because we'll give away everything in return for convenience. But I really don't want to be connected to apps that check my location and report back on what I'm doing. I just don't really trust that it's going to be used for the right things in the future. And again, there is a really interesting conversation happening at the moment around Corona. What governments are doing to track people's location, and how they're going to help people make sure that they're staying within the prescribed or outside of the prescribed areas, and at the right distance from everybody. And in Israel and Taiwan, these things are in effect right now. And they've created digital fences around places to control people that have been put into quarantine. And these are just temporary solutions. I don't believe that they're temporary. I think once you put these things in place, they always seem to have a very permanent status. And where I think we're already seeing it happening is, insurance companies are using data based around, your movements in your car, because you're using Google Maps to track your speed and to track how erratic you drive, and whether you're stopping at stoplights or whatever else, to help you reduce your premiums. It's never going to be to help you to reduce your premiums. It's always going to be to penalize you, or to charge you more, or to penalize those that do break the rules or had to rush to get their wife to the hospital or something else. That sort of data, and constant gifting of data from us to these faceless corporations concerns me. So that's the reason that I'm quite often unplugged. I don't use Google Maps. I use an app called Jumbo that basically deletes all of my location history every 3 months. It deletes all of my tweets past 3 months old. I don't use Google products. I try to use like Cake Browser or DuckDuckGo or something else. I don't really use any tools really that have got anything to do with location tracking for this very reason. And I think it's a super important lesson. The thing that I really realized though in writing my book was that most people unfortunately don't really understand it or care too much about it, because convenience is the most exciting thing for them. That's why we started Empty Day. It was really just about trying to get people to value unplugging for one day only, and understanding that if they could just turn their phones off for one day, it would have I think a major impact on your lives. If everybody did it, there wouldn't be that FOMO. You wouldn't have the feeling that you are missing out on something. But also there was another underlying part to it, which was if Facebook and Google are totally reliant on all of this information and data to pay for the services and to keep their servers running, wouldn't it be amazing if we all left it alone for one day? The financial impact on these companies would be quite impactful, and I think it would make a lot of people wake up and question what's happening and how much money is going to these two corporations. It's basically the whole media landscape has become a very small space of just a couple of companies.
Well, let's dig into your book. So the book is The Trust Manifesto, What You Need to Do to Create a Better Internet. And you point out, and I'm going to quote you here, you say, "I am not a technophobe. I work in tech. I am not knee-jerking against this, but I am inviting an appraisal." You're inviting an appraisal of the ways we've built the internet and the pieces you say we can reclaim and rebuild. Your focus is on big data or data scraping. And one of the things I enjoyed most about your book is your use of metaphor. So I'm wondering if you could help us with a metaphor to explain big data.
At this very moment in time, big data, it's probably already too late, but big data is everything that you know about yourself and everything that you didn't know about yourself in the hands of a company that is going to use it to monetize products, to sell to other people or to sell back to yourself. And in my book there's a metaphor in the beginning which I really like, because it was the moment that I think that my mum understood what it is that I was talking about, where I said, imagine that you're on the high street and you're walking down and you pick up a pair of sneakers from a store. You don't particularly like them, so you set them back. And as you walk out of the store, the shop assistant follows you out of the store and follows you into the next store, and shows you a picture and asks you if you would be interested in reconsidering buying those sneakers. And if this was to repeatedly happen as you walked along the high street in and out of different stores, it would be such a massive invasion of your privacy. I think that everyone would go crazy. I mean, you'd be screaming at this individual, telling them, whatever. But that's what happens on the internet. I mean, the thing that I think is fascinating is that we just accepted it as being normal. That the way that we should be treated online, when we spend a phenomenal amount of time in this space, is we should be basically treated as morons. We should be treated as if we can't make decisions on our own, and we're not able to remember anything. So the only way that we can be reminded of stuff is to be continually hit literally around the head with these things, whatever it is, a service, a pair of sneakers, a video conferencing tool, whatever it might be, until you give in and purchase it. And the thing, that I think we did differently in the company, and the thing that I would love other companies to think about too, is if we're spending, upwards of 20, 40, 60 hours a week online, and right at this moment, right, it's even more. This is the space. This is our new habitat. This is the cityscape that we're creating. If this is the place that we're living in and we're spending so much time, are these the conditions that we really want to live in? Is this the norm that we want to accept in the way that people talk to us and work with us? Are these the are this the language and the tools that we're going to accept as being normal and acceptable in our society? And I would love everybody to just think about how we can use those things that we love about the offline world online. The more that we can think about the internet as a cityscape and as a place that we live in and that we commute through and that we build in and that we educate within. If we can think about that as in the same terms and frame as the offline world, then I think we'll create a much better, much richer, much more fun and safe place to live. But right now, in the cityscape that we've created, we basically have data being oil and people mining it left, right, and center, just extracting as much as they possibly can. Literally in the way that the oil fields were mined in the turn of the last century. And we know at a certain point that it's gonna dry up. But we're investing in it, we're giving it away, we're handing it over, and there is nothing in place. There's literally no infrastructure to protect us or to protect that information. There is no neighborhood watch, there is no police, there is no real government, there's no real control. Nothing is helping protect this cityscape that we've built, we've enabled. And that's the piece that's really missing at the moment. So a big part of the book was really asking people to consider three things. One is, look at the internet as a place that we are inhabiting and we are creating, you and me, not companies, but you and me. And then ask, what do we want? What are we willing to give away? What do we want from this space, and what do we expect? The second part is, as companies, if we're putting up shops or we're creating businesses or whatever else in this space, what are we going to do and what values are we going to put down that we would do in the offline world and apply them to the online world, and not think about the online world as this prospecting town where we just got to go in and milk it as fast as we can and get out, because that's just not the reality. This is the place that we're going to spend a big chunk of our lives going forwards. And then lastly, I think, and this is to individuals and companies, we collectively have to speak to government and lobby for better regulation. It can't be that 4 companies in the world can pretty much dominate the entire internet. I mean, it's the largest cityscape that's ever been created, and it's pretty much controlled by 4 companies. The physical infrastructure that we're reliant upon at the moment through COVID-19 is pretty much, Amazon. They are delivering packages to us all over the world, and that infrastructure is owned by one individual who's the wealthiest individual on earth, who up until very recently hadn't given any money away to any charity at all. Obviously, recently announced his mega $10 billion fund. But up until that very moment, this was a guy who, to be frank, is a bit of a megalomaniac. I think, we need to ask government to really consider what regulation needs to be put in place to ensure that this new cityscape is safe for our future generations. And I see us, Tim Berners-Lee was the sort of pioneer. Then there's been this huge wave of prospectors coming to this town. For our kids, we need to make sure that the architects and town planners and the structure is in place to make sure that the grotty parts of the web that we've created and all the crap that's disappearing or is just about short-termism is being gentrified. And like Citizen Jane, we need a few people to stand up and sort of fight for the rights of the internet. They are out there, but it's so big that it's going to take a real concerted global effort to make it happen.
You say, quote, "It's increasingly important these days to forgo worshiping the machine. The seductive machines we've built are easy to worship. At the same time, it's increasingly important we all step up for a personal reckoning with the machine." And then you later point out that it will be a minority, as you just mentioned, who will actually do it. It always says, you say. Then you go on to talk about UC Berkeley's Joe Hellerstein, who calls the moment we're in an industrial revolution of data. You write, "We've heard the industrial revolution analogy before, but this time the analogy should give us pause. We're being pushed forward. The revolution is happening around us. The forward trajectory seems inescapable, but at what cost?" You say this is why now is the time for appraisal. And self-appraisal or disruption is not something Silicon Valley or the greater world of tech is interested in perfecting. We're going to need to do the work ourselves. And I know you touched already on those 3 core points that you're suggesting for individuals and for companies to take on. But if you were to speak to an individual listener right now, what are some steps that they could take right now to begin to turn this tide?
I think, there are some very micro level things that can, we as individuals can do immediately. So I would really question the need for everybody to use Google products. I think, there are plenty of great alternatives out there. If I asked you, whether you'd be willing to do all of your shopping, within a Westfield shopping center, and in doing so, you need to hand over all of your information to Westfield, and they'll make sure that everything is taken care of. I think you'd say, no, I like going to Whole Foods and Air One or Target or whatever else. You want that freedom, right? You want to be able to choose, and you want to be able to have some independence and not be reliant on one sole party. At the moment, the internet is pretty much Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, pretty much it. And these companies are the richest, most powerful companies on earth. The individuals, and this is the most worrying part, the individuals that run them, are have sole control. Mark Zuckerberg has sole control over the entire Facebook organization, as does Jeff Bezos. Is that decent? Who would want that? Why would anybody need that? And I think if you ask yourself those questions, then I think everybody should hopefully get to the place they say, no, it's true. I think if I had that much money, I'd be doing a lot more good, or I'd be trying to do something different. I think the next action you can take is just simply to stop using those products and look for alternatives. There's a million alternatives to Google for searching the internet, or for planning a route or a journey somewhere. The same goes for Amazon. You don't need to get a new Swiffer mop within 2 hours. It's very convenient, but if you do appreciate the high street and the small retailer, then support them. Just go outside and go and buy something. I think those very simple steps, just looking around and taking a little bit more time to consider where you're giving your time, your money, and your data, I think are really critical.
You have created a different company in WeTransfer. You made a lot of decisions early on about the values that you had as a company in terms of respecting your users, listening incredibly well to your users about what their fears were, what their desires were. What would you say is your biggest pride in creating WeTransfer?
I think the thing that gets me out of bed every morning is that we have a model whereby we give away 30% of all the advertising inventory that we have on the platform to support, good causes or creatives, artists, freelancers, charities, you name it. And, that 30% is somewhere in the region of $300 million that we give away and have done to support gun reform or, homelessness in LA, or a photographer who's producing a program called Legacy of War to even still the war in Vietnam and on Cambodia and places like that. So it's that inventory that I think is really impactful. That is very core to WeTransfer's DNA. A big part of the reason that people come and work at the company is because of that side of the business where we do good. I'm very proud of that. I mean, the fact that we have a file sharing business that's used by 60 million people worldwide is great, but I think the fact that we managed to turn it into a machine that can really, do good and is trusted by millions, and in a very simple manner can do, can make quite a lot of difference today is really quite exciting. I'm very optimistic and excited about the idea that we, as we continue to grow, we can continue to do more good. That's pretty cool. And I never thought 10 years ago we'd be in this position that we are today.
That's amazing. What do you think we need to live well in a wired world? What are the things that we need to support us to live well in a world that you describe as becoming our new city?
Well, I mean, just off the cuff today, we need each other, right? So that, we need to fully understand that the internet is great, but, it's not the be all and end all. And certainly we did a piece of research last year called the Ideas Report. And we asked, people where they most got inspiration. No one was getting inspired from the internet. No one was getting inspired from being behind a screen. And people were finding inspiration from the outdoors, right? From the great outdoors, from parks, from beaches, from mountains, or from being with people. So I think, the most important thing that we have to remind ourselves is that we are, as a race, as a breed, we are we have sort of pack mentality, and we need to be around people, right? We can't have people permanently working remotely. That I think is, absolutely critical. The other part I think is that, like everything, and I love the fact that we, live back in the Netherlands, we could see there is just a very good understanding of moderation. So in this market, there are not tons of obese people walking around. There are not tons of billionaires or tons of people living on the streets. It's all pretty well managed. And some people would say that it's boring, and others might say that, it's Calvinistic, or it lacks ambition, or the rest of it. But no, I think in general it's just very modest, and that understanding. And if you understand and appreciate modesty and moderation, I think it stands you in really good stead. The internet's great, but like a hamburger, if you eat it 3 times a day and every day for the rest of your life, you're not going to be in very good shape. Spending 10 hours a day behind the internet is not going to be good for anybody. But a couple of hours every now and again, it's going to be amazing. You can learn so much. You can do so much.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you shared that about the ideas report. I mean, I wish that we could see each other, because I got the biggest smile crept across my face, because obviously the name of the podcast is the JOMOcast, and our entire theme is about the joy that we can find in missing out on the right things, and the fact that all of these creatives are finding their inspiration in relationships, in the real world, in nature, and the connections they're making offline is just a delight to hear, and not surprising, but to have that confirmed in that report is quite amazing. And also what you said about needing one another. I wholeheartedly agree. Damian, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
So it's been a pleasure. I hope that, everybody back there is safe, and that next time that we do this, it'll be in real life as opposed to behind video conference.
That would be amazing. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about our guests in the show notes and by visiting jomocast.com. The JOMOcast is edited and music composed by Thomas J. Inge. Visit Tom online at tinge, that's TINDGE.com, to learn more about Tom and his services. The JOMOcast is listener supported. Sign up as a patron at patreon.com/JOMOcast. Patreon support makes the podcast possible. For just $3 a month, you will keep these conversations going. That link again is patreon.com/JOMOcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast with your provider of choice. And if you loved this episode, leave us a 5-star review. These reviews are a powerful way you can help us reach more listeners. I'm your host, Christina Crook. Thanks for listening, and may you find joy missing out on the right things.